Hey guys, this is podcast number 3 or 4. I have a very special guest on, Ben Wilinofsky. I think I nailed that.
No, not at all.
Damn it.
Wilinofsky.
Wilinofsky, Jesus.
You chucked another F in there.
Damn
I
it.
don't know what.
I apologize. I tried to get it right too.
That's okay.
He is NeverScaredB online, won like EPT main event. He's a luck box.
Huge luck box.
Super good online player. Lots of money made there. And we have Douglas LaFord. Or don't tell me
close.
Damn
Lyford.
it. It's so bad messing up people's names. Lyford. Anyways, he's gonna be the Brian Redban of the podcast, minus all the weirdness. He's gonna edit and make the videos better, because I suck at that thing and all that shit. Anyways, without further ado, Ben Wilinofsky, say hi to everyone, I suppose.
Hi, everybody.
So what's up, dude? How's Vegas going?
I'm not there yet. I just go for the main. I didn't even go last year at all. I don't like Vegas, so I try to avoid it. But I won a package this year, and kind of upset because there was some problem with the U.S. consulate system, so my wife doesn't have a visa now, so I'm going to be in Vegas by myself, which is pits, but I'll have, friends there that I can hang out with, I guess. But she's never been, and we were, looking forward to this trip, and it was going to be cool. Now it will not be.
It's annoying.
Yeah, I as a Canadian, I never ever had problems with travel. The worst I got was some hard ass giving me a tough time at the UK border when I went to London one time because I didn't have my shit together. But I married a Russian girl, and it has super made me appreciate how much bullshit goes into just people going around. She went to school for 8 years in the States and had a bunch of student visas and stuff. And every time we've gone somewhere, we went to Barcelona together and we went to Australia together, the visas just take a bunch of money and time, and it ended up being just weeks apart every time because her visa just wouldn't come, and my visa for Russia would expire and I'd have to leave the country. So that shit's super frustrating.
Yeah, that sounds really
highly recommend being born in Canada if you want to move about the globe.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds hard. Or just not marrying someone in Russia. Minus all the difficulty.
You don't pick who you love.
Absolutely. So yeah, the main reason I guess we had you on this podcast was, you had the Poker News interview about mental health and depression, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misnomers regarding that, so I think it would be cool to kind of, I guess perhaps, we kind of have to start with your whole story, if you didn't mind. You can cut it down and tease it as much as you want, and I guess go from there.
The whole story, wow, okay.
You don't have to do the whole story, you could tease it down to...
So I think I've had some of these depressive tendencies. I don't know at what point. The lines are all super blurry with this, so I don't know what the point was when I went from depressive tendencies to depression, and I don't know when, at what point I cross into it or back out of it. That stuff is all super unclear, but I've definitely had depressive symptoms since I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and a lot of social anxiety, which after kind of a bad relationship with a crazy person developed into full-blown general anxiety, and a little bit probably of PTSD from that as well, and that all made the depression worse. And it was kind of after that which sent me really spiraling into an unhealthy place where I was thinking about killing myself a lot, that I decided to seek help for this stuff, and so it was, it was in my 20s. It was probably 10 years after I felt that something wasn't right for the first time, but it took me that long to realize that I needed some guidance and some help with making it get better.
So you took antidepressants for a bit?
I did. I took antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. I was on. I started with an SSRI, which is a serotonin suppression selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I think it's a class of drug that just affects how your brain absorbs serotonin. Didn't find it super helpful and found it really dulling. I took Wellbutrin as well, which has a little bit. Wellbutrin's an antidepressant, and it has a little bit of sort of upper effect, and so when I started to reduce the Cipralex because there was some uncomfortable symptoms or uncomfortable side effects. With that, my anxiety got a lot worse on the Wellbutrin, so I had to cut those back eventually, and I ended up not being on anything for a while. Right now, I just very recently got something called a beta blocker for anxiety. What this does is there's two receptors for adrenaline in your brain, and a beta blocker blocks the receptors that give you a lot of physical symptoms, stuff like heavy breathing, hands shaking. So I decided I would get that before I went and played live poker in Vegas, because I think it's bad to have a lot of those obvious symptoms of anxiety while I'm doing that, and I'm testing it out right now, and I tried it on. I've taken it twice, just for a Sunday session and a Tuesday poker session. And so a jury's still out on that. But those are the medications that I've taken. And, I tried self-medicating with alcohol for a while as well, and it didn't help me. But
yeah, I can't imagine that's too helpful.
Adding more depressants to a depressive person is not a great idea.
I think a lot of people have, I think my gut reaction to antidepressants is like, oh no, don't take that. I think that's like a lot of people's gut reaction. And what are like?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think there's sort of an anti drug bias, and I thought a bit about where it comes from, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of people only see the suppression. A lot of these problems, a lot of the anxiety and depression problems, are not going to be really obvious to people that have a superficial interaction with you. But what is going to be obvious is the suppression of a lot of things that people around you enjoy. Part of my anxiety is really what I would call performative, where I get social anxiety and I become chattier and I joke a lot and I become very quick. And part of that is just I'm so anxious that I'm like very adrenalized and boom, 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 rapid fire. And I think people saw some of that come out when I was deep in Berlin. There was a lot of anxiety around there. And so it gives you this kind of personality that people get used to and enjoy, but they don't see the underlying root cause, which is harmful to you, and they don't see the side effects, and they don't see the down periods. And so when you take a medication that eliminates the root causes that are hurting you, and sort of evens you out a bit, and makes you less
It basically makes you seem
a
unhappier.
less interesting person to be around, or a less of a partier, or less of that fun person that's acting out. People see it as kind of suppressing your personality, and they see friends that lose, not really good friends, but friends that they know, people that they know and that they hang out with, that lose their desire, or their desire to kind of party and act out, and the things that make them fun people to be around when you don't really know them, that are hurting them. So I think a lot of the bias against those medicines comes from, it's affecting, someone seeing that it's affecting my personality, that I'm less active, and that I drink less when I'm not feeling this pain, so I'm not partying with people anymore, and I'm not chatting, and I'm not a really lively person anymore. And people see this play out with a lot of people and say, oh, you don't need those medicines, they kill your personality, and they don't really see the benefit.
That's a really interesting take. I never thought of that at all. My knee-jerk reaction to antidepressants is like, oh, unnatural, oh, side effects, or...
I think there's that as well, and there's this kind of naturalistic bias where people are like, oh, I want to cure it with, all these healthy green plants that grow from the ground, like, marijuana, or, all you need is to do a juice cleanse. And that's not how it fucking works. That's not how brains are really complicated, and for people to say, oh, you can get everything you need from Mother Nature is really, really fucking ignorant. Like, a lot of these compounds, a lot of the compounds that are helping people cope with anxiety, yeah, they have active ingredients, but it's still a chemical reaction in your brain. And just because it's a chemical reaction that comes from a plant doesn't make it like instantly a healthy and best chemical reaction for this person to have. So there is a lot of that bias, and there is a lot of sort of knee-jerk, I'm not sure about these medicines. And, part of that is I'm not sure about these medicines either, and nobody's really sure about these medicines on a case-by-case basis, because human brains are really outrageously fucking complicated. Like, if you've tuned into any of the debate that's going on, artificial intelligence or whatever, human brain is probably the most complicated thing that we can work with. And so if our solution is to put medicine into it, we're not going to have a really high degree of certainty of like how that's going to work in the chain reactions we're going to have. We're just not. And so, a good success rate for this stuff might be, 30% that the first drug that you try works for you, right?
Yeah.
And that would be an insanely good success rate. 30% that the first thing you try works would be great, but that's still a 70% failure rate. And people say, people will try something and then it won't work. And, medicine doesn't work. That kind of small sample size fallacy that people get trapped in, especially non-poker players, where like,
so yeah,
if you go out with like two women and they're both mean to you, you'll just come out of it and think like, all women are bitches with your sample size of 2, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. But human brain's not good at coping with probability. Yeah. So when something doesn't work the first time, we just leap to the assumption that there's nothing there for us.
Yeah, it's very easy to try 3 different ones and have them not work. And then...
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what the actual success rate is for SSRIs. Are usually the first thing that we try, and I don't know what the success rate is for them the first time, but I think it's quite low. And I think in general, I'm trying a therapy for my anxiety that is in general has about a 50% success rate. over a lot of clinical trials, but it's over a long, like you have to get to the long run to hit 50%, and you have to work on it for a long time. Yes. And sorry, go ahead. I'm super rambling here. If you have another question to check.
Yeah, well, I guess is there a high probability of side effects? I mean, is any of this stuff, any of people's concerns founded or reasonable?
What are side effects? What does that even mean? Side effects, like.
I think people are worried about like extreme side effects, like potentially maybe feeling more suicidal or more depressed or more mad.
There's a chance of that, yeah. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Did I lose you?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. It sounded like I lost you for a second. Yeah, there's a chance of that, and like, there's a chance that, I don't know, your dick will stop working for a while. That happened to me. Shit happens. But like, you still have to try. Like, living with this shit is not tolerable in any way. It does not work. So, if you have, you're going to have some negative side effects, but there's still the potential for positive results as well. And the positive generally outweighs the negative. And yeah, sometimes doctors get it wrong when you're working with the most complex thing that we have, which is the human brain.
Yeah.
People get it wrong. And I don't think the fact that it goes wrong is a good enough reason to not do it. I mean, there are certainly cases where you should get a better opinion from a better doctor, or if something's not working, you need to change it. But the fact that things will go wrong is not a good reason to not try and make them go right.
So what about the argument, what about the arguments like, well, why don't you just try stuff like meditation and yoga and stoicism or whatever?
I'm familiar with what it means to be stoic. Is stoicism just not pretending nothing's wrong, basically, or just acting like
that's like the really surface way of it. It's extremely deep, much deeper than that.
Okay.
Stoicism's about realizing that it's really hard where to start, but I'm just gonna start. So it's about understanding that the events in your life aren't really important, and when it comes to happiness and being unhappy as well, you shouldn't let any event get you too happy or too sad.
Okay.
And it has to deal with the logical reasons behind that, and it kind of has to do. So very simple is the main way to happiness, in their opinion, and stoicism is being a friend to yourself under right thinking, right thought processes. But anyways, go ahead.
Okay. So I think I think all of that stuff are useful tools in the toolbox. I am trying to work with meditation to help improve, my life as well. I don't think that, you should try this thing is an argument against you trying other things. That's not really a reasonable way of attacking the problem. Yes, I think meditation's is a big part of my own therapy and my own practice, and it's a big part of what I do to try and help myself. But it's one tool in the toolbox. I don't think, as much as I harp on go see your doctor in my blog, that's because that's this, like you said, that's the step that we have this bias against. That's the step that is most difficult, I think, for people to accept.
It's the ego too, right? Like, I want to do it all on my own.
Yeah, I think there is some of that. I don't know how much of my blog you've gotten into, but my first post is about how that's just a huge crock of shit. Like that, I want to, not wanting help, basically, is just this huge, disastrous, ridiculous, silly way of approaching things, and it's not logical. It's not reasonable. I kind of get an idea of where it comes from in people's minds, but it's just a shitty way of living your life, and it's a shitty way of attacking the problems in your life to try and be sort of this lone cowboy fighting just battles in the horizon of your mind. It's just ridiculous. Like, get all the help you can get. Always get all the help you can get.
Yeah.
If you have a problem that you are not equipped to deal with, get someone who is in there fast.
Yeah, I think a great way to put it is, like, think about all the great things that have been accomplished in the world. How many of those people just accomplished them completely all alone, all on their own?
Like none.
None.
Zero.
Absolutely zero. All the great human accomplishments are, about other people. Even, like, great biographies, like, if you read them, it's not just all about them,
It's I 100% agree with you. I had another point here that I wanted to touch on, and I think I may have lost it.
Well, if you get it, just interrupt me. I mean, I think
we were talking about meditation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna nail this. And we were talking about
the ego.
We were talking about meditation and medicine and just like alternative things that people try. I think it's super important to have as many tools in your toolbox as you can to fight stuff like this. I think it's really, really silly to restrict yourself and say, I'm only going to try natural remedies, or I'm only going to try things that would have been available to people 1,000 years ago, because 1,000 years ago people dealt with this shit. And how did they deal with this shit? Well, differently. But none of these people are throwing their iPhones into the fucking ocean and going to farm with 1,000-year-old farm equipment. None of these people are dealing with any other problems in their life by completely restricting themselves to just the solutions that would have been available to them a long time ago. So I think it's really silly that people have this naturalistic, especially around medicine, around a health issue, is the least sensible thing to have that kind of hang up on, right?
Yeah. To be honest,
if you want to go live on a fucking farm, and that's what makes you happy, that's fine. But if you want to tell not just yourself but other people, you can't do this thing. This thing will be bad for you. Don't do it. That's just with extremely limited. The experts know 3 or 4% of what there is to know about the human brain.
Yeah.
How are it? It's like the people that take their medical advice from Jenny McCarthy and I don't want vaccines because vaccines are unnatural, or vaccines do this bad thing that we don't like. And it's come on, listen to people who know what they're talking about. You have the opportunity to access this great trove of actual knowledge, and instead you're just guessing based on what feels good to your intuition. And like, I might even be able to tolerate that if it was just you that you were affecting, but you're affecting everybody. You're affecting, every time somebody goes and talks about how someone else should seek their health care and how bad these things are that might work for somebody else. Like, even if they're not the thing that works for you, to go and badmouth them.
Is there not the same, so there's stuff like Adderall and painkillers and stuff, is there not the same type of abuse or addiction related to antidepressants?
I don't think there is. I don't know. It depends on what do you call abuse and what do you call addiction. You can definitely form a chemical dependency on antidepressants. That's not out of the realm of possibility, and it can definitely change your brain chemistry. I guess I don't know the nuances of what makes something an addiction versus just a dependency or whatever.
Yeah, like someone close to me was on Adderall, for example, and just got very addicted to it, and kind of their whole life just kind of blew up and spiraled out of control, like a very negative way. And she had to try and kick Adderall, and she went through like symptoms of withdrawal, and it was actually quite difficult. And then after she got off it, she felt, way better. So I guess that would be like a clear-cut example of abuse / addiction.
I have not seen that with prescription antidepressants or with any of the medicines that I've taken. But I'm not that. I'm not that in touch with people that have taken them often. So I might not be the best person to ask about this. Right. Like, I have a very, very limited sample size of dealing with these drugs.
All right. So here's like a multi-part question. So would you? Well, I guess we need to start with explaining the difference between clinical depression and situational depression, and whether you think the latter group should try antidepressants too.
Situational depression and clinical depression. I think clinical depression is the group that should try antidepressants even more so.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know enough about this topic. The answer is almost certainly you should see your doctor about this.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
I can't, I'm not the person to be giving people medical advice, and brains are different, and this condition is different. So I wouldn't pretend to know the answer to that question, and I'm not going to speculate, because I think speculation in these kind of fields is dangerous. But we should always strive to have as many tools in our toolbox to deal with these things as possible. So I think that in my experience, antidepressants kind of definitely got me through a low point in my life. That for sure helped tremendously. I don't know. Nobody should be going out and trying to figure this out on their own. Seriously, talk to a doctor. I don't think I can give better advice than that, really.
Okay.
Sorry.
So there's a difference between like clinical and situational depression, which I guess people don't get. I think a lot of
Okay.
people have been depressed and are like, I think you talk about this on your blog and you're like, oh Ben, why don't you just do this or try and do that or whatever. But it's just they're two different things, right?
Yes. Situational depression is a depression caused basically by outside factors in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Clinical depression is a depression that's caused by other factors, factors outside of the very basic sort of inner workings. And so it's kind of like when depression gets to the point, or when depression is not, sorry, I'm just like babbling, and I'm trying to. All of the terms that I like know to describe this are, I guess, kind of jargony. I'm trying to make it really simple. If you're depressed for a reason, if there's something in your life causing you depression, then that could probably very accurately be described as situational. If you have no reason to be depressed and are depressed anyways, that's much more likely to be a clinical depression.
Are there just times where you're having no negative events and no like negative self-talk and you just feel depressed?
I can definitely still have the negative self-talk with it. There are definitely times when, are there ever really times in our life when there's no reason to be depressed? But I don't think that's like a reasonable standard to set. But if you can't, if making things better in your life doesn't help alleviate some of the depression you're feeling, then it's probably not situational. I've had times where like I make a giant live final table and I feel absolutely nothing. Like just nothing. There's nothing there.
Okay, that's a good example. I think most situationally depressed people can't empathize with that at all.
I think so too, and I think there's also this kind of convolution of depression and sadness that we see happen in a space where we're very we have trouble distinguishing kind of between the two. And part of it is, there hasn't been enough of this dialogue, and it's kind of super unclear which is which. Like, there are very smart people that still than exaggerated sadness, and that's not really how it works. I think, as we deepen our understanding, I think, and as people get crisper, clearer concepts of depression, I think that'll happen a lot less. But right now, our ideas of depression are super murky, and we end up with this convolution that makes it difficult for people to really empathize properly, because they don't, they're like, oh, I was sad, this helped, and so, and it comes from a good-natured place where, like, I want to help this friend of mine who is having a shitty time of life. How can I do that? But it's not it's not that simple. What's helped someone will not necessarily help someone else. What's going on in the brain is not the same when, one person feels sad.
Yeah, I don't even like the idea in general of trying to achieve happiness through external sources. I think it should all just kind of start from within, and I guess that's a hard thing to talk about with someone who's never thought about that before, who's like never meditated or been introspective or sat in silence or anything like that.
I what my least favorite term on the fucking planet is guilty pleasure. I think that's so fucking stupid, and I think there are so many people that for whom happiness is such a difficult thing to reach and a difficult thing to achieve. And if you find something that brings you happiness, just fucking enjoy it. Just have it and hold on to it, and don't let other people make it guilty for you. That's like, I think I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think we should be restricting happiness in any kind of meaningful way. And I think like reducing the scope of these are the appropriate things to feel happy about.
Yeah, I definitely didn't mean that. I mean more like,
I think it won't work for a lot of people.
I think I love external things. I love, finding fun from outside sources. But I think that's just something, I think that needs to be, I'm not at that point by any means, but I think it needs to be at a point where it's like, that's something you just want, but don't need. Like, you can be perfect.
That would be really nice, yeah.
Like, that's the whole idea of, like, stoicism. Like, there's these stories of Stoics who, this guy gets his village burned down, and his kids die, and all his, like, tribesmen's not the word, because this is ancient Rome. All the villagers died along, and, the guy who took over his village, like, says, I have conquered you. And then the guy yells out cheerily, I have all my goods with me. And he's actually just really cheerful and happy in this situation. And obviously that's a super extreme example. But I think it's very interesting having a non-attachment to things we can't control. Being willing to kind of lose the things that mean the most to us, and be happy just with the things we can't control, which is kind of just ourselves, if that makes any sense.
I think that's a nice, I don't know, maybe it's not a nice story. I think that's an interesting theory about the way the world works, and I think it maybe is a useful coping mechanism for a particularly difficult world, but I don't think it's an especially natural way of dealing with things. And I don't think there would be anything wrong with that person feeling great sadness necessarily. I don't think there would be. I don't think we should be. If there's someone who can live their life in such a way that they are still happy in that situation, that's amazing. But I don't think that should be our goal, and our goal shouldn't be even really happiness and sadness here. Like the eliminating, again, that's, if that shit happens and you fall into a situational depression, that's extremely human.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think that Stoicism it sounds like it might have been a way to cope with a cruel and harsh world that might have been a useful coping mechanism. But I don't think it's either a necessary or necessarily the best way to cope with the world now. We don't need to deal with a harsh and unforgiving world. We have enough control over situations that we can be very we can be not harsh and not forgiving, or not harsh and forgiving on ourselves and on each other. We don't need to, we don't need villages burned down, and we don't need to fight and scrap and deal with incredible pain for our chance to survive. We can do better than that as a society, and we can make it easier on people as a society. I think that sort of that non-attachment to material things and non-attachment to things you control is also, I guess, very common in Buddhism and in Buddhist philosophy. And I think that it is probably a way to prevent yourself from being touched by the situational things in life. But I think that's a problem to solve, but I don't think it's the same as attacking sort of anxiety and depression at their root causes.
So, well, I guess, like, getting into meditation, how long have you been doing that for?
I've been trying to meditate, and I've been trying it on and off for a very long time. I recently went to kind of a guided meditation 2 times in 3 weeks. It was a group that Ape Styles actually introduced me to, and he's done some work with them. It's tough. Like, it's work doing that stuff. It's not.
Why is it tough?
You ever try and, not... It's very unnatural. We're very, especially as online poker players, how many decisions per second per minute do you think you make on a Sunday? Or how many decisions total do you make on a Sunday?
I know exactly why it's tough. I'm not, saying, man, it's not tough.
Yeah,
but
no. I know you know. It's incredibly difficult to quiet your mind.
So, I'm not sure, I believe the idea in meditation, and I could be wrong, but the idea isn't to, the idea is just to be present of what's going on. If you're doing mindful meditation, the idea is just to be mindful, right? And use your breath as to come back to your breathing. I think everyone's like, oh fuck, my mind's racing, and getting really frustrated, and then their mind races more, and it makes them pissed and mad. But the idea isn't for your mind to race. Your idea is just to be present of your mind racing, and then come back to your breath. Your mind races again, be present of that. You come back to your breath. There's no winning or losing. There's no
Yeah, but that's tough. That's tough in itself.
Yeah, it's really tough.
What else do we do where we're so measured? We're so everything we do is winning and losing, and everything we do is graded and measured and
has a purpose. It's for a reason.
Yeah, and has a long-term goal. I think of meditation like mental rehab, and if you've ever done physical rehab exercises, they are fucking slow and frustrating, and you don't see the results for a long time, and they don't feel good.
Yeah, no, I have.
They don't feel like exercise that you're used to. They don't tax you in the same way.
Yeah.
And meditation is a lot like that. It doesn't tax you in the same way that that your brain is usually taxed. It doesn't tax you in the same way that we usually problem solve in.
It can be so frustrating. There's this one method I use, and I got it from Elliot Hulse, which I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but
maybe it's not ringing any bells right now. Go ahead.
He's not he's not like a guru or anything, but I just like if I'm meditating, I kind of just picture like my mind is like this fucking massive hurricane and just like this whole like destruction being like wasted, because that's kind of what it feels like when your mind's just racing and going into crazy thought after thought after thought, like this huge massive hurricane, and me just like sitting like on the floor in the middle of it just watching it like as an observer. And that kind of helps to kind of remove myself from the whole ego or identity with it. And not...
I might try that next time. The kind of the guided meditation I've been doing is just like count your breath and follow your breath, and
what's
I guess
the highest you've
breathing,
counted?
just like count 1, breathe in, breathe out. Count 2, breathe in, breathe out, and that's supposed to be your focus.
I see. I've never done that. I imagine I wouldn't be able to count that high, even though I've been like meditating for 3-4 years.
We were sharing our experiences after, and I was talking about how I kind of had to let go and let myself fail at it, and go back to, if you find your thoughts wandering, and you find your mind getting distracted, you're supposed to go back to 1 and start again. And someone was telling me after they heard the story about, someone asked the Dalai Lama, how do you meditate? And he said, the thing I start with is I try to do, this counting to 10, these 10 mindful breaths. And that's how I start. And this person said, okay, well, what do you do after? And he said, I don't know. I've never gotten to 10. So, I find that a little bit encouraging, because he's a guy who really seems to have his shit together, and if he can't get to 10, maybe I can get my shit together without getting to 10, and maybe just working on the journey is going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely the wrong way to look at it for like trying to like keep score and like ego battle, like, hey, what number you got to, like, on your breaths, But
I'm so used to that, and so the first time I did it, I was like, I put up my walls. I'm like, I'm not going to think thoughts, and I'm going to get to 10, and I'm going to power through, like it's fucking weightlifting set, and I'm like on the last one struggling, like 10, but just keeping, and it was so exhausting. Like I tried it, and I don't think it helped me.
Yeah.
But it just, it just ruined the shit out of me, basically. And so the next time I did it, I felt the thoughts creeping in, but instead of like putting up my walls and like straining myself to just keep myself on the path and just get to 10, I was just like, okay, I'm going to fail at this, and I'm going to go back to 1, and I'm going to keep doing that. And I got back to 1 a lot, and I started again a lot, but I was much calmer at the end of it, just trying to get there instead of kind of holding a gun to my head to do it.
So, in what ways has this helped at all since you've been doing it?
Oh God, I don't know. I've only done it twice, so I haven't. Like I said, this is like rehab exercises. This is like do it every week, and maybe one day things will, hopefully feel better. So I haven't really seen results from it yet, but I do know that I feel different after doing it.
Yeah.
And that in itself is kind of important. That's like a valuable experience that I can learn from, and it's, I'm looking forward to it, hopefully, being better in the future. And I'm optimistic that because of the changes I feel, it will help me in the future. But
what are your expectations? Like, how do you think meditation's supposed to help? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions with meditation.
I try very hard with this stuff not to set expectations.
Yeah. What do you like? How do you think it helps though? Like, what do you think? Like the great meditators get out of it?
Hmm. I don't know. Ask one. I'm seriously like I'm very. I think it's very important to me to not try to set expectations here, and I think it's very important to everyone who's going to try it to not set expectations, to go in with an open mind and try, hoping that it will work for you.
Yeah. So yeah, the main I think the main reason people get into it is like for the calming, kind of like relaxing aspects of it.
I think that's it too. Sorry, I can't talk about why I think it's appealing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's more of what I meant. Yeah.
I think it appeals to people, again, because it's sort of a natural fix.
Mm-hmm.
It's not tinkering with your brain chemistry. I think it also gives people, when people have success at it, I'm in the very, very frustrating parts of it right now. But I think people get a sense of control out of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you can do this exercise for your brain and it affects you really on an emotional level, and it affects how you're experiencing the world, that's a pretty cool thing, and it's a pretty powerful thing to feel. It gives people a sense of sort of being the captain of their own ship again. And for a lot of people who have dealt with depression and anxiety, that is an extremely, extremely valuable thing to feel. Because I felt very out of control of my own life for a really long time. And meditation has given me some of that back. I feel more steady after I do it. It also, there's a lot of good science behind it as well, that it affects your brain, and it can actually change your brain activity, which parts of the brain are most active. It can help you grow parts of your brain that have been under exercised, sort of. So It is really like brain rehab, in that sense. So I think that there are a lot of benefits to be had, and there are a lot of ways that people can feel like it helps them.
Yeah, it's just the initial competitive
result. Getting over that part is really fucking just.
And I mean, I've been doing it for 3-4 years, and I'm still like not over that part. But it's now just like this internal struggle of like, oh, like I'm constantly there's this observer side of myself that's like constantly like wants to check if I'm doing good, like this monitoring system. Then I'm like, oh, don't worry about doing good because that's how you do good. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm stuck in my thoughts, like worrying about this, and now I gotta go back to my thoughts. And then it's like, oh no, you're not supposed to worry about that. You're supposed to let it flow or whatever. I mean, it's just really like there's so many like seeming contradictions, and with it, makes it kind of difficult.
It's extremely it's extremely counterintuitive.
Yeah, definitely. I think the coolest thing for me with meditation is just being able to just be more present and kind of just enjoy things that I don't usually enjoy, that I never took enjoyment out of. Just like really.
Do you have a specific example in
mind? So like very specific examples. Like, I'm hesitant to do this. I remember there's like this blog post of you talking about when you hate when people talk about things they enjoy, and like
do that.
No.
That wasn't the point. I hate when people are like prescriptive about it and like, here's the. First of all, that blog post was definitely written in a very dark and very frustrated place where people with good intentions. It's not that I hate when people talk about the things that they enjoy. It's that I hate when people talk about, or I hated when I was in a very bad mental space. people talking about what has helped them feel better with the expectation that it will help me.
Okay, yeah, that makes.
I found that extremely frustrating to deal with. That like people would be, just try this, just do this, and like it just felt like they were treating me like I was fucking stupid. Like, oh, you just need to you're just like not trying hard enough to feel good. If you just try this thing that you know, like you just obviously haven't thought that maybe exercise would help.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay,
You know, so please tell me. I love hearing about what people actually enjoy when they're talking about things that have made their life better. Please.
Okay.
Share.
So, very interesting part of meditation is like, I like really small stuff I can really enjoy. Like I can, like 4 days ago it was raining outside. I literally just stood outside in the rain and just watched the rain for like 30 minutes with a huge smile on my face, and just because it's a pretty interesting meditative experience when you're just completely focused on how the rain affects the water and like the concentric circles and the sounds and the smells, and it's kind of like an immersive experience when you're able to just really focus and turn everything off, and it's actually like a really beautiful experience.
Rain is very like, and I'm not going to mean this in the traditional sense, but it's very sensual. Like it affects your senses in a lot of ways. Yeah. I remember like when I was 11 or whatever at summer camp, just it started raining and I just stood under kind of a lamp and looked at the rain coming down and sort of how the light played off of it, and it was really cool. And that was such a like incredible experience. And now like these days I would just never have that curiosity or that I don't know what you'd call it. I have actually, you know what I have done more and more, and I can really I mostly have my wife to thank for this. I've actually been literally stopping to smell the flowers recently, and it's really nice. Like flowers are really pretty and they smell really good, and you know, it's like the blue. We're kind of just like at the tail end of spring, and all the flowers are blooming, and there are some like really great, again, sensual like experiences that you feel with your senses, with sight and smell and touch, that are really just super pleasant, that I think people are just like, I get caught up in thinking about the future or the past and miss out on those things that are super, super pleasant and immediate.
Yeah, it's just not being... Exactly, just not like being present. So
not being present, and it's I just didn't want to use present and pleasant in the same sentence. That is really a lot of what it is, and when I had times in my life, especially when especially most of my life, but especially I guess all through high school and then the beginning of my university, I was super, super driven. Like I was just like very, very goal oriented, and I'd set a goal and I'd go for it, and I push everything else to the side. And I got very good at hitting those targets that I set for myself. But it didn't make me happier. And I think like something clicked after I won an EPT in Berlin, which was like just a huge life-changing thing for me and a huge life goal. And I felt really, really good for like a day and a half or 2 days after. And then I returned to my baseline and I'm like, well, fuck, if this isn't going to do it, nothing is, right?
Yeah.
Like if that doesn't flip the switch, then I'm setting all the wrong goals here. And it didn't flip the switch. I mean, I felt really good for a couple of days, but it was mostly probably just chemicals in my brain.
Do you think that those are the wrong goals for everybody?
No. I don't think... I think we should have zero judgment about people's goals and what makes people happy.
Do you think that really makes people happy, though?
Happy is a weird word.
It is a weird word.
Let's hang on. The tournament that I'm one-tabling in the background is on break, so let's take a 5-minute break, and I'll come back with my ideas about happy. I'm just going to take a piss, and I don't think you guys want to hear it. Is that okay?
Doug? No? Don't want to hear that?
All right.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, we both don't want to hear that.
Okay, I'll be back in a couple minutes, guys.
All right.
Cool.
So, Doug, what's up?
Not much, just kind of taking this on. This is super interesting.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting, dude. He's one-tabling something. Not sure what.
Oh, yeah.
I guess, what have been your experiences with meditation? You've been doing it for like 3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah, I would say probably about 6 months. One of the things that I was thinking about when you guys were mostly talking about doing like mindful breathing meditation.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you, or I guess Ben too, if you guys have tried like I don't know if you've done body scan meditation, where it's also mindful meditation, but it's an alternative to focusing on your breathing, where you just sort of start at the top of your head and slowly try to focus on the parts of your body and go down through to your toes.
Yeah, I've tried it a few times, and I guess I just didn't like it that much. Do you like it, or has it been
Yeah,
cool?
I do like it. I tend to do that more often than the breathing, and I find it easier to focus and easier to just not. I don't feel like my mind is racing as much when I try to do the body scan, and it just seems easier to sit down and do. And another one that I really like is just finding a specific noise to focus on.
Okay.
So you just sit with your eyes closed, and maybe you're sitting next to a stream or something like that, or you could even do it just in your apartment when nobody's there, and just focus on the sort of ambient room noise and the noises maybe from traffic outside, whatever noises are nearby.
Yeah, I think you can kind of pick anything to focus on. As the body scan stuff, is that translated into life? Are you able to just be more present and aware of your body, like just during regular days?
I would say it's more just being present in general. It's not really tied to paying more attention to your body. It's just general presence of mind, just like the other techniques.
I see. Cool.
Yeah.
Have you experienced the being able to kind of just enjoy really simple little things?
Yeah. The things that I notice most that I think meditation has helped with are things like being present when I am having dinner with my girlfriend, something like that. So I guess those aren't the simple things, but I do have little moments where I think I notice things or enjoy things more that maybe I wouldn't before.
Yeah.
The other day I was walking, and I was walking out of a woods trail, and there was these 2 kids in front of me, and they had sticks, and they were pretending one was a bow and one was a gun, and they were just playing a game with these sticks. And I remember kind of just smiling and watched them play for a little bit, and just kind of thinking, I wish I could just like pick up a stick and have a great time with it for an hour.
Yeah. That's funny.
There's a masturbation joke in there somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Alright, so I'm gonna watch you try and fail to redefine happiness right now.
Okay. I think I'm not going to try and define happiness so much as I'm gonna talk about the idea of happiness. It's actually a fairly new thing. People see happiness as this basic sort of human precept, and you can blame a little bit of the Declaration of Independence for that, where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are sort of these guaranteed human rights.
Are you saying that we didn't use the word happy until like the last few hundred years or something?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah, and the concept of happiness was not really even that important. Like, people didn't have this idea of happiness until the last few hundred years. I can't remember exactly when it came about and when the first instance of it is. But, for instance, the ancient Greeks' idea of a good life was a life sort of lived well, and I guess that rules in some components of kind of valor and just
Virtue.
kind of morality.
Yeah.
Virtue is the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
So happiness is kind of a weird concept, and our brains aren't really wired for it. So when you say, do I think this makes people happy? The answer should be for how long? Because our brains are wired to return to our baseline very quickly after something new happens. Like I was talking about the win in Berlin. I got kind of high for a couple of days just off of endorphins and emotions and weird things happening in my brain. But you're not wired to stay that way. You're not wired to be happy. You can feel happiness, but the way our brain is wired is to experience it as temporary. It's a temporary elevation from our baseline. And some people will have happier baselines than other people, and I think my personal baseline is very low, actually, and that sucks.
That's such an interesting way to put it.
But there's a very... I think part of meditation is, or part of the benefits of meditation is the potential to move that baseline up, by the way.
Huh.
And in terms of changing your brain activity, moving that baseline is basically incredibly hard. And I've heard, I hate throwing random statistics into conversations with no basis and no source.
Yeah.
But I've heard somewhere that, in terms of our happiness, about 80% of it is kind of our genetic baseline, and you just can't move the needle, which, in a way sucks, but in another way, frees you from a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure to feel happy. I think
I think that's a good baseline, but it's kind of like people who say poker's 90% skill and 10% luck, or try and throw numbers to that, I think it's just kind of impossible.
Well, that's stupid. That's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
But, and I agree. I agree that, trying to identify this amorphous thing of happiness and trying to identify, the percentages that each part of your life is responsible for it is kind of silly.
Yeah.
I think that, where was I going with this? I had a really good point. I just fucking lost it. I hate when this happens. Sorry, guys. I get super caught up in my own head. In case you didn't notice, and I'm chasing these thoughts around in circles, and then when I lose sight of them for a second, they duck around a corner, and then I just can't find them anymore. So I was talking about how, in a way, it's very freeing and to not be responsible for moving this needle and to be able to focus on it. Oh, so I think a lot of why I was in denial about a lot of my depressive problems for a long time was all of these external things were really good for me. I was in great shape. I was young. I was smart. Once I had poker going for me, I had a lot of disposable income for someone my age and and all of this stuff. And I wasn't happy. And so, a lot of my life was trying to push those things, the things that should make me happy. And I think once I realized that that it doesn't work that way, and once I realized that there was this huge chunk that I couldn't just move the needle on, and that I wasn't responsible for. I didn't need to work harder. I didn't need to make my life better. I didn't need to make myself, more attractive and get more sex and get more money and make myself. I didn't need to better myself in all these ways. That wasn't the way to attack the problem. That was very freeing for me. I talked earlier about how driven I was, and that let me, live life differently than I was living, because a lot of my drive, a lot of being driven came from these super, I was just miserable, and I was like, all right, well, I have to fix this misery, and I'm going to try and do it this way.
Yeah, I remember reading you saying you took a lot of time off poker, or you cut it by a third or half or whatever.
I've taken so much time off poker. My wife was studying in Boston. She wasn't my wife for all of it, but I just went and lived with her in Boston for like 15 months, and I just didn't play at all.
What did you do with all your downtime?
I wasn't productive. I started grinding a lot of Magic Online. Actually, was like what I did with my downtime. It was so wasteful. I could have I had all these plans to, I was going to get back into exercise and hammer my rehab, my physical rehab, and all of this stuff. And I had a couple of issues with physical sickness, and that kind of drove my mood down a lot, and just kind of torpedoed my motivation and made it very difficult to follow through on those plans.
I see.
But I had great ideas of what I was going to do with all my free time.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if you weren't going to be goal-orientated or have the... I was just wondering how were you planning to live life differently if you weren't trying to go for the typical vision of success that most of us Westerners have?
I think one of the things that I wanted was, rehab my mind and rehab my body. I used to be like a real gym rat, and I think that helped me a lot mentally. And I had a series of injuries, and I kind of let slip with that, and my body is a little bit beat up now. So I'm trying to slowly work on my rehab so I can get back in the gym. And this has been my plan forever, and it just is very slow going to get back to the point I want to be at. I want to rehab my mind. Meditation is a big piece of that, and there are other types of therapy I'm working on. Cognitive behavioral therapy is supposed to be a big piece of helping me cope with my anxiety.
Yeah, what is that exactly? Is that something easy to explain in like a few sentences, or is that like a...
I'm going to try. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of therapy that is supposed to be very good for anxiety, and the way it attacks anxiety is there's this process of anxiety where you start with you start with a stimulus, and then you have an immediate reaction to that stimulus. There's a thought or something.
So something that would purposely make you anxious. You start with that.
Yeah, you basically so the anxiety process is kind of this 3-step process where it's like stimulus, and then you process the stimulus, and the stimulus makes, and then the anxiety comes from the way you process stimulus, right?
Okay.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is trying to attack that circle at the process part, how you process stimulus, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to okay, here's the stimulus, but don't jump into the anxious processing. So it is, you do kind of it is kind of like exposure therapy, or like a little vaccination or inoculation for anxiety. You go and you give yourself a little bit of this stimulus that makes you anxious, and so you get more and more anxious. And anxiety is a fight or flight response. That's typically how it's categorized. This is the response your brain has where you're trying to cope with danger. And basically what you're supposed to do is go and and process it to the point where your body realizes there's no danger. So you're supposed to get past the peak of your anxiety. So you get more and more anxious with the stimulus. It could be anything. It could be like loud noises. It can be crowded places. You get more and more anxious with it. And then at some point, your mind realizes it's not actually a threat and your anxiety starts to decrease. And once you've gotten over that hill, you push it a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's just training your brain to realize that this thing that you're perceiving as a threat is not actually a threat.
I see. It sounds pretty interesting. Sounds cool.
It has a very, very high success rate, like in the 50% range for dealing with anxiety disorders. So there's a lot of good science behind it, and it's something that I should be doing more of and working harder on. But it's really easy to kind of coop yourself up in a little ball and not experience any anxiety, especially as someone who has online poker as a way to make money. I don't really have to go into my anxiety. I can just hide in my room and click the cashier button and get them to send me checks, right?
Yeah. You were talking about exercise and I guess kind of movement for dealing with depression. Are you familiar with like all the different types of movements you can do to kind of help deal or cope with different emotions?
Maybe. I don't know quite what you're talking about, but if you share examples with me, I might understand.
Okay, so Elliot Hulse, that guy I was talking about on YouTube, talks a lot about this. So, for example, when you're very simple examples like being really angry, how to deal with that. A lot of people want to kind of think their way out of this anger, but he just talks about the physical things you kind of need to do. Like, he literally just says, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but you would squeeze things really hard, or yell really loud, or if you're nervous or anxious or something, like you shake your body around and like literally just shake your body, and that like kind of like releases the tension and nervousness. Or if you're feeling pretty numb, for example, listening to music and dancing, or I don't know, just doing like watching or listening to something that elicits emotion.
That's interesting. I wonder about the shaking thing, because the anxiety disorder I've been diagnosed with is what's called a panic disorder, and it's kind of the anxiety about being anxious, basically. Like
Yeah.
you start to feel anxious, and you get anxious that you're going to get anxious, and it feeds on itself like that. So,
Never-ending loop.
So yeah, it's a terrible feedback loop. And when you say like if you feel anxious, you should shake your body, I don't think that's a good thing for me as someone with a panic disorder to do. That sounds like a bad strategy for dealing with it.
I see.
For anxiety, I am sure that there are people who are helped by this process. It's another tool in the toolbox, and if it's something you haven't tried, maybe, and you deal with these problems of numbness, deal with it. I found music and movies to not really work for me when I was dealing with depression, when I was dealing with the really numb lack of feeling.
Yeah.
It did not help me much, but...
Did anything help? I mean, I feel like that's one of the hardest states for me to get out of personally, when I'm just really numb and just don't want to do anything.
I'm trying to think if anything actually helped. Not really.
It's just the thing.
I mean, that's not true. There are things that did help, but I can't point to any one repeatable thing that I could do that would work.
Just different success rates, I suppose.
I would never really know what it was that was going to help me. Sometimes just petting my dog would help me snap out of it. Sometimes, my wife helps me snap out of it a lot when I feel myself spiraling. But there, it's very unpredictable and it's different every time. And I can't really say there wasn't one thing that I did at any point where I'm like, all right, this is the thing, and follow this, in just 6 easy steps, you're no longer depressed. It doesn't it doesn't work like that. I think we crave that kind of solution so much. The 6 easy steps to fix your problem. We want clarity and structure in our solutions, but the brain is fucking murky, man. It is just, whatever is going on in there is so convoluted and complex, and we don't really have a great idea of cause and effect up there.
Do you feel like numbness is one of the hardest emotions to deal with, or is it more anxiety for you?
Numbness, for sure. The lack of emotion. Anxiety, I feel like, I've never had anxiety for days on end. I've had anxiety, and anxiety peaks, and it's really fucking stressful when it peaks, and I'm exhausted at the end of it.
But it's over pretty soon.
It's done.
Yeah.
And I feel fairly confident when I get anxious that it's not going to last forever. Yeah. But when I felt numb for months on end. Probably, I don't think there was ever a year-long period where I was numb the whole time. But not knowing, not seeing or not thinking about light at the end of the tunnel, and not being able to, it's like, we want those 6 easy steps. We want a predictable solution to it. We also want a predictable endpoint. If we can hold on to it gets better, it's not that hard. But when you're at the bottom of it, you just can't hold on to it gets better. You don't feel like it's ever going to get better, and you don't really have a, without those 6 easy steps, without a predictable plan to make things better, and without a predictable endpoint, you don't really have a reason to suspect it gets better, right?
Yeah. So, sort of interesting, completely unrelated question. I think, how do you deal with anxiety in poker? Like, I find it very interesting, like, just how crazy lag you are, but then you have anxiety at the same time. You just, like, pull off, like, these huge, like, high equity bluffs. Like,
craziness?
Huh?
Yeah. That's always been weird to me, too, actually. And I'm like, I can be downright life-nitty, or I definitely could before, not as much anymore, but I don't know. I guess the game is just separate for me, and I don't really. I actually think that part of it is kind of that performative thing where I actually pull the trigger more when I get anxiety. I get too trigger happy, and I'm not exactly sure why that is.
I see.
But I remember, like, for instance, I made a really bad bluff at the final table of the 10K scoop in, like, last year, I guess. It wasn't even that long ago. And it just, after I busted that tournament, I went and, like, lay on my bed and was physically just, like, retching and shaking from the anxiety that had built up. So, it's weird. And certainly, like, I guess part of why I'm trying to take these beta blockers is so that I can pull triggers if I feel it's correct without being worried about giving something away, and without having anxiety that I will have anxiety in Vegas.
Yeah. So I remember what I was talking about, actually.
Great, perfect. Let's go back to that.
So yeah, I was talking about numbness, and I feel like that's the hardest emotion for everyone to deal with, the most difficult one. I mean, for me, it's just because it's my defense mechanism for pain. Like, pretty good way not to feel pain is just be pretty numb. And I think that's the most human thing, to just want to avoid pain at all costs.
Yeah, that's a lot of what kind of all trauma is. Trauma is, or not trauma, but like PTSD and reactions to trauma are your body's attempt to kind of cope with, your body's and brain's attempt to cope with pain of different kinds. And it's not, it's very human, but at the same time, living with it, and living with, anxiety of that nature is can be really crippling, and it can, if you have, if you get burned by a girl, and then suddenly you have anxiety around every intimate relationship that you end up having, that that can hurt you, and it closes off a lot of opportunity to feel positive things, and you close that off because you're worried about the wound that has been caused being reopened. It's superhuman reaction, completely 100% natural. But finding ways to cope with it that don't cost you as much, I think, is one of the kindest and most what's the word I'm looking for? Most virtuous things we can do is finding ways to help people with trauma live a life where their trauma doesn't close them off from things that could help them.
So what I think is really interesting is when you look at babies. I mean, I have 2 of them, so it's kind of interesting. Like, everyone talks about how happy kids are, but they just cry, like, all the fucking time. Like, if you're around a human that just, like, an adult that cried that much, and, you'd be like, man, there's something wrong with this dude, right?
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because kids don't hold back any emotion at all. That's not a thing. And they never feel numb. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. Not once have they ever felt numb. I've never seen that, that specific look or feeling from them at all.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I guess it's just that lack of fear or just being completely open to feeling.
That might be it, yeah. I mean, when we're talking about the reactions to trauma, we're talking about, people closing off, right?
Yeah.
And kids, I think in general, there are exceptions, but generally do not have the kind of trauma that causes them to close off and to ball up and to protect themselves from feeling that again. I hope so. I hope to God most children don't have to deal with that. And so it's only when we get exposed to those things that are that causes so much pain that we feel the need to react that way. That's when we ball up and try to numb the pain.
Yeah, I guess numbing is kind of like a learned human emotion rather than an inherent one.
I wouldn't call it an emotion. I just call it a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think... Yeah. Makes sense. Well, I mean, I guess this is kind of like the natural end of this. Doug, did you have any questions you wanted to perhaps end with?
Yeah, I did have one question. Ben, you've been pretty open with us about your struggles with depression, and I was wondering if having these open talks about it Do you find that helpful, and do you consider that one of those tools in your toolbox to help deal with it?
I found the process of opening myself up to talk about it to be extremely helpful. I wouldn't point to any individual talk, but I think it compares. I've compared it to the experience of coming out and to kind of accepting a part of my life that I had been in denial about, or that I had tried to not face because of a social stigma around it. So the stigma is not the same, and how much it's a part of your identity isn't really the same. But I think that process of no longer feeling the need to hide this, and no longer feeling the need to combat what is a very real part of my life, has been very freeing.
Okay, great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. I usually kind of end with the same kind of questions. Any books that you recommend or most gift to other people?
Books that I recommend or most gift to other people? I don't really do a lot of self-help books per se.
Okay.
I can recommend some books that I've enjoyed and that have helped frame the way I look at problems. I think the book that I recommend most to people is The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. And these are, they're nominally fiction books, but they're fiction books about the real world and about how people behave around each other and treat each other. So that would be one of the ones, and also Breakfast of Champions by him. I think those kind of detail what the things that a lot of people use to feel whole, and the things that don't work and the things that are missing. I think, and they do it in a very compassionate, gentle, lighthearted and funny way. They're satirical, and they poke fun at all of these things that I think contribute to mental health problems and feelings of anxiety or depression, and sort of all of the wrong ways that people try and solve the problems. But they do it in a compassionate way, not in a way that tears down people that are trying the wrong things. Because everyone's just trying to live. Everyone's just trying to make their way in the world and find their happiness and find their way of tolerating what can be a really harsh and cruel experience of being human. And I really like that the tone that these books strike with people that are trying and failing.
Yeah, I think figuring out how to live is just this really intractable, kind of impossible problem. I feel like we'll hit the singularity before answering that question.
Why can't we just figure out how to play poker hands? I love fucking poker because everything's so simple. All the problems you face are so fucking simple. It's great. It's so, and you get to feel like you're solving something and fixing a problem, and then I look at my real life and my real life problems and just, what the fuck? How do I deal with this stuff? I can't count the combinations of depression, so I'm I don't have the tools for it. But poker at least lets me feel like I'm solving something.
We will have a super smart AI create a Card Runner's EV. They create that for life.
CREV, life EV calculator.
Yeah.
So you're on the positive side of this singularity thing, then.
I am. I'm on the super ignorant. It could be both side.
Did you read the Wait But Why about AI that was floating around recently? It's super long but really interesting.
I haven't, but the last guy was on.
I'll link you to it after. It's really
The last
good.
the last guy on the podcast linked me to that as well, so I'll definitely read it.
All right. Well, you're getting a lot of feedback that this is something you should read. So if you're going to keep talking about the singularity, you have to inform yourself a little bit.
All right. Well, can you inform me a bit on singularity? I'm pretty ignorant on it. I read like Kurzweil's book, watched the documentary, but all I know is like it's exponential growth and it's gonna happen and it's inevitable, basically.
I don't come so far down on the side of inevitability as I think a lot of people are. I mean, there's a decent chance that we just kill ourselves before we get there.
Yeah.
But it's, as far as I can tell, it is the, excuse me, it is when, we have sort of this exponential growth rate of technology and of the rate that the world around us kind of changes in very structural ways. And we are very probably going to hit a point where it happens so quickly that we can no longer like acclimatize to it before it changes again. That's my understanding of the singularity, and artificial intelligence seems like a very reasonable way for that to happen. But this is a whole other podcast, and you should have someone else on to talk about it, because I'm just an expert in what the fuck is wrong with brains.
I see.
Based on my own experience, I have no experience with the singularity.
All right. Are you on? Quick question: are you on the negative or positive side of singularity?
I am on the side that that humans are really fucking dumb. And so we should not be tinkering with big cause and effect webs like the environment and the ecosystem and stuff that we don't really know how it works and what to expect when it happens. That's the side I come down on, is that like we're dumb and we can see like a quarter of a move ahead, and to really intelligently work on these problems you need to be able to see like 8 moves ahead. So until we get there, just stop it. Stop
all technological progress.
Yeah, it's just just
we
just
have enough, right?
while.
We got iPhones, computers, good internet. Don't need anything more.
I know it's not practical, but I think we need to stop pushing buttons to see what happens when we can't unpush the button.
Okay, fair enough.
That's my opinion on this, because I don't have a lot of faith in humanity to see all the pitfalls coming and to avoid them all.
All right, dude. Well, thanks for being on, dude. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was good talking to you guys.
All right,
Yeah,
thanks,
man.
Have a good one.
Bye.